And so, while witchcraft and goddess worship are a major conduit for the demonic energies that swirl in and through the abortion movement.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Hold on a second there. That's a whole lot of bullshit. None of the videos that you have done so far in this series have convinced me that this is true. So before you just make this big, huge statement here, you haven't supported it. This is your belief based on your Bible.
There is another, more masculine component as well. Good old-fashioned, do what thou wilt Satanism. And back to Crowley.
Again, this is something that we addressed in the last video. Aleister Crowley's do what thou wilt is just half of the entire law of Thelema. And this has absolutely nothing to do with abortion.
Aldous Huxley famously dined with him, and it was rumored that the old beast took the opportunity to turn him on to peyote.
Oh, wow. Yeah, okay, that's pretty hardcore research right there. Okay, so these two men were in the same room together once. Well, there you go. You convinced me. Yeah, when he turned him on to peyote, too. Sure.
Not only did the famed author of Brave New World later romanticize the emerging drug culture by writing Doors of Perception, he also wrote the preface to Birth Control Methods by Australian sexologist and closet homosexual Norman Hare.
You keep throwing this out, accusing people of homosexuality like you think it's some kind of a federal crime. Back then, homosexuality was considered to be an illegal activity, so a lot of people had to keep this fact of their lives hidden. It doesn't mean anything, except they just had to keep it hidden.
A colleague of Ellis and Hirschfield's, and an attendee of the World Sex Congress in 1921, Hare, like the others, was a staunch supporter of gay rights and the eugenics movement.
You keep throwing eugenics into this. This was actually just a theory that never made it off the ground. That's why all these photographs are black and white from the 40s.
But even more interesting and significant is Crowley's connection to perhaps the 20th century's most influential sexologist, Alfred Kinsey. Founder of the Institute for Research in Sex, Gender, and Reproduction at Indiana University, now called the Kinsey Institute. Kinsey, like his European counterparts, set out to normalize all manner of deviant sexuality under the guise of objective science.
You mean normalize homosexuality?
Bisexual and with a penchant for masochism, Kinsey encouraged group sex among his graduate students and filmed sex acts in the attic of his home under the guise of research.
Yeah, because he devoted his life to studying sexuality and human sexuality, so of course.
Toward the end of his life, Kinsey, along with avant-garde filmmaker and Crowley disciple Kenneth Anger, visited the great beast at his lair at the Thelema Abbey in Sicily. Anger later observed, Kinsey was obsessed with obtaining the great beast's day-to-day sex diaries.
He may have wanted to find out for research purposes.
To obtain grant monies and maintain the support of the university, Kinsey needed the excuse of research to validate his 24 hours a day obsession with sex.
I don't know where you got this quote. I'm sure Kenneth Anger said all sorts of different things, but where and when and how and in what context?
That the man who perhaps more than any other was responsible for the, quote, legitimization of sexual perversion in the latter half of the 20th century was both a pervert and a fan of the century's most notable occultist is a fact that should be shouted from the housetops, as well as his connection to the abortion industry.
You could shout it from the rooftops. Oh no, Kinsey knew Aleister Crowley. So the fuck what? And you keep saying perverted, but your opinion of people's sexual positions, desires, and partners to you is perverted. It's not perverted. It is normal. It is sexuality It is explored sexuality, and people should explore. They should feel comfortable to explore it. It's not perverted, okay? That is your perception, your belief, because you're some kind of uptight guy who has to face his wife whenever you engage in sex once a month because, well, you just have to because you're married.
In April of 1955, 16 months before he died, Kinsey attended a clandestine conference on the abortion issue at the Arden House in Harriman, New York. Sponsored by Planned Parenthood and the New York Academy of Medicine, a report from the conference was published 3 years later. Edited by Planned Parenthood's president, Dr. Mary Calderon, abortion in the United States was the first serious apologetic on abortion rights. Kinsey was quoted as the leading scientific authority at the conference, citing data from his questionable research suggesting that illegal abortions were very common and dangerous, while therapeutic abortion performed by a doctor, posed minimal health risks.
Yes, that is absolutely true. The people who were performing abortions were not medical professionals because medical professionals weren't allowed to do it. And so, yes, that is how we got the concept of a coat hanger abortion, because it was that barbaric.
In other words, legalizing abortion made perfect medical sense.
Yes, it does make perfect medical sense.
Pregnancy, Birth, and Abortion, published the same year by 3 Kinsey Institute researchers and dedicated to Kinsey, made essentially the same argument. Together, these books were a first major strike against America's abortion laws and provided the so-called scientific support for the prestigious American Law Institute's position on abortion. Codified in their 1959 draft of the Model Penal Code, the proposed law allowed for elective abortions in case of rape, incest, fetal deformity, and threats to the mother's physical or mental health.
Regarding rape and incest, some people make an exception for that, but if we really believe that a human life begins at the moment of conception, then how can we say that someone who was conceived by virtue of somebody else's sin is less worthy of life than somebody who is conceived in any other way? It's not the child's fault with regards to rape and incest. And we don't undo one tragedy by compounding it with a greater tragedy. Death never overcomes adversity. Life always triumphs. From a personal perspective as well, my own family has experienced both rape and incest, where my father raped my sister. And it's obviously a tragic experience for anyone, certainly when it happens in a family member or when it happens to anybody. But rather than choose death, she chose life. And as a result, my niece was born. And my niece grew up and she was married and she gave birth to another daughter. And both of them have now graduated from high school. So I have 2 generations that have come from a tragedy. I could never look at my nieces and say that it would be better for you to have been killed for something that you didn't do. And neither would my sister ever reconsider that decision to choose life. When you choose life, that's always the right choice.
Because you are not the person experiencing that. If you are the woman who has gotten pregnant through a rape, incest, or both, it is up to you. It is your choice whether or not you wish to carry that child to term or if you wish to abort it. Unless you are actually making that decision, I would shut the fuck up and sit your ass down.
Well, most people think of Roe v. Wade because that was the first decision, but there was a companion decision that followed right up after it, again in 1973. Roe v. Wade said that the state of Texas could not limit a woman's right to have an abortion because of privacy under the 14th Amendment. But Roe v. Wade, in their attempt, the judge's attempt to be a little more reasonable, put a limit. You couldn't kill a child after that child was viable. Along came Doe v. Bolton. And most people have never heard of Doe v. Bolton, and they are under the illusion that you can't kill a child when it is viable. You can kill a child up to 9 months, a minute before that child would be naturally born. And that's what Doe v. Bolton did. It took away all the little safeguards that Roe v. Wade had, their companion decisions. And it listed as the way that you would judge whether you could kill this child, the life and the health of the mother. And under the health, they included all sorts of things like emotional, physical health, but emotional, financial, educational. In other words, they just opened the floodgates.
No, they did not open up the floodgates. They actually took a all-encompassing view of what it means to bring new life into this world. Simply producing life is not the end. That's not your work is not over at that point. It is actually just beginning. You have financial responsibility to be able to raise that child. You have emotional responsibility. Are you ready to have this child? Are you prepared to have this child? Are you going to be giving it a healthy and emotionally supportive environment to raise a child to maturity of adulthood? Are you secure in your life, in your relationship, in your environment to be able to bring a child into this world? Do you have enough time? There is so many other factors that come into raising a child than just the ability to produce it and grow it in your womb. So, yes, the people who decide to have an abortion, who may not fit all of those categories, are not monsters. They're actually responsible people who are looking at their life, looking at their situation from a realistic point of view, and asking themselves some pretty tough questions.
It is perfectly legal in all 50 states of the United States, because this is a Supreme Court decision, to kill a child right up until the moment that that child would normally be born.
You mean the right to have an abortion or not to have an abortion?
This last stipulation, mental health of course, was the camel's nose in the tent that made abortion as a fallback method of birth control possible.
Let's be honest here. We all have met some women who are not mentally stable enough to raise a child, or if they do have a child, they are not mentally stable to be raising that child.
All a woman had to do to get an abortion was to say that having the unplanned baby would impinge on her happiness or peace of mind. The door to abortion on demand was now open.
That's a pretty weak argument. I think that they would probably come up with a little more than that, like they're not ready for it, they're not financially prepared for it, they do not have the time and the energy to put into it. Basically, they understand that that is the beginning of their work, not the end of their work, and they're not prepared for it. There's nothing wrong with saying, assessing the situation, and then at the last minute saying, whoa, hold on, I'm not ready for that. I'm not prepared for that. And again, it is her decision to make that call.
New York was among the first states to walk through it, and by 1970 had the most liberal abortion laws in the country. The Supreme Court forced the rest of the United States to follow in 1973.
They're not forcing other people, they're simply enforcing the law.
Citing the ALI's model penal code in its infamous Roe v. Wade decision. Do what thou wilt became the whole of the law.
Stop conflating these things. Aleister Crowley has absolutely nothing to do with abortion. He never owned a clinic, he never supported a clinic. All right, well, this is the end of this video series. Thank you so much, and blessed be.
Ha 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 ha!